Wu Zhou, from an obscure concubine to the sole female emperor of China. Wu Zhou, 624 to 705. A resounding name throughout the long history of China, was a unique phenomenon, the first and only woman to formally ascend to the throne as emperor, establishing her own dynasty. Her life is a dramatic epic of ambition, intelligence, ruthlessness, and extraordinary governing talent. From an unknown Chiron, talented lady in the imperial harem, she gradually overcame all the barriers of a patriarchal feudal society, dominated the court, and finally stood at the absolute pinnacle of power. This report will present a comprehensive and detailed account of Wu Zetian's life, from her origins to becoming the female emperor, analyzing the crucial turning points, key political decisions, and the complex legacy she left for posterity. Asterisk, Part 1. The Roots of Power, Early Life, and First Steps into the Forbidden City, 624 to 649. 1.1. Noble lineage and a distinctive education. Wu Zetian, who later created her own given name, Wu Zhou, was born on February 17, 624, into a family of status and influence. Her father, Wu Zhou, was a founding merit official of the Tang dynasty, hailing from an aristocratic family in Shaanxi, and a successful timber merchant. Her mother, Lady Yang, was from the imperial clan of the Sui dynasty, giving her noble blood. The Wu family also had a close relationship with Li Yuan, Emperor Gaozong of Tang, even before the Tang dynasty was established, providing a solid political foundation. The most significant difference that shaped Wu Zetian was her education. In an era where the concept that a woman without talent is a virtue was deeply ingrained in society, most noble ladies were only taught sewing, embroidery, and other domestic skills. Wu Zetian was an exception. She had no interest in such things but was passionate about reading and studying fields like politics, literature, and rituals. Notably, she was encouraged in her studies by her own father. Wu Zhou, a remarkably progressive idea for the time. This unique education was not merely an accumulation of knowledge, it shaped a worldview and ambition that transcended the norms. For a noble woman, early exposure to political and historical knowledge planted seeds of power and the ability to change one's destiny in her mind. Rather than accepting a life of quiet compliance, this was evident when she was summoned to the palace, while her mother, Lady Yang, wept for her daughter who had to face the perilous life of the Forbidden City. Wu Zetian calmly comforted her. "Why does mother say that meeting the Son of Heaven is not my fortune?" This statement was not the naivety of a 14-year-old girl, but an early expression of an iron will and an ambition nurtured by knowledge. She did not see entering the palace as a passive fate, but as an opportunity, a political stepping stone to a greater future. 1.2. 12 silent years in Emperor Taizong's harem, 637 to 649. In 637, at the age of 14, Wu Zetian, with her outstanding beauty and intelligence, was summoned to the palace to become a Chiron for Emperor Taizong Li Shimin, a concubine rank that was only 5th in the harem hierarchy. The emperor gave her the name Wu Mei, meaning beautiful and charming. However, her entry into the palace was largely political, a move by Taizong to appease and show favor to founding officials like Wu Zhou, contrary to expectations. During her 12 years serving Emperor Taizong, Wu Mei was not favored. She was never promoted and had no children with the emperor. There are many theories to explain this lack of favor. One suggests that her strong and decisive personality did not suit Taizong's tastes. The famous anecdote about her requesting an iron whip, iron mace, and dagger to tame an unruly horse revealed a resilient, even ruthless, character that made a seasoned emperor like Taizong wary. Another, more scientific theory suggests that in his later years, after the shock of Empress Zhongxun's death, Taizong overused longevity elixirs. These elixirs often contained heavy metals like lead and mercury, which could have damaged his health and affected his fertility. However, this period of disfavor was not a dead end, but became a strategic incubation phase, facing a bleak future, which would most likely end in a remote temple after the emperor's death. Wu Zetian did not accept her fate. She realized her path to advancement did not lie with the current emperor. Instead, she shifted her focus to his successor, Crown Prince Li Jie. It was during these forgotten years that she boldly and cleverly established a secret romantic relationship with the Crown Prince. This was not just a simple affair, but a calculated political investment for the future. She turned a period of neglect into an opportunity to build a new power alliance, a perfect contingency plan for the day Taizong passed away. This was the earliest evidence of her extraordinary political calculation and ability to seize opportunities. Part 2. A Path of Blood and Flowers. Becoming Empress of the Great Tanks, 649 to 660, 2.1. From Garnier Temple back to the center of power in 649, Emperor Taizong passed away. According to court regulations for childless concubines, Wu Zetian was forced to become a Buddhist nun at Garnier Temple. It seemed her political career was over, but the emotional bond she had previously sown became her lifeline. The new emperor, Gaozong of Tang, who already had deep feelings for her, could not forget her. On the anniversary of his father's death, Gaozong used the pretext of visiting Garnier Temple to pay his respects, and there the two met again. Wu Zetian's return was not solely based on the emperor's love. It was also fueled by a fatal miscalculation from her own rival in the harem. At that time, Empress Wang was out of favor and overshadowed by consort Zhao, a concubine beloved by God. To deal with consort Zhao, Empress Wang came up with the idea of bringing Wu Zetian back to the palace, using her as a pawn to divert the emperor's affection and create a counterbalance to consort Zhao. Empress Wang completely underestimated the intelligence and ambition of the woman she actively brought back, thanks to the combination of the emperor's love and the empress's jealousy. Wu Zetian grandly returned to the political stage, transforming from a nameless nun into a new force in the harem. 2.2. The harem's war and the case of Princess Anding-upon. Returning to the palace, Wu Zetian was quickly promoted by Gaozong to Zhao Yi, a high-ranking consort ranked 2, and received boundless favor. In 654, she gave birth to a baby princess, later posthumously named Anding. However, a tragedy occurred. The child suddenly died at just a few months old, right after Empress Wang had visited. The princess's death became one of the most controversial cases in Chinese history. Emperor Gaozong, already dissatisfied with Empress Wang, immediately accused her of murdering Wu Zhou's daughter out of jealousy. However, many historical sources, especially later records, allege that it was Wu Zetian herself who smothered her own daughter and then framed Empress Wang to eliminate her greatest rival on the path to power. Whatever the truth, Wu Zetian demonstrated a ruthless and effective ability to turn personal tragedy into political leverage. Instead of being consumed by grief, she immediately recognized the political value of the tragedy. She skillfully staged the scene, fully exploiting love and credulity. turning a personal event into an undeniable political case. This act showed a cold calculation where political goals were placed above even maternal love. After the case, Empress Wang and consort Zhao, in their desperation, were accused of using witchcraft to harm Wu Zhou. The plot was exposed, and both were deposed and sent to the cold palace. But Wu Zetian did not stop there. For revenge and to eliminate future threats, she ordered them to be brutally tortured. It is said that she had their hands and feet cut off, and then had them submerged in large wine vats until they died in agony. This cruelty spread terror throughout the palace and cleared her path to the highest position in the harem. 2.3 Deposing Wang, installing Wu, a political coup. The removal of Empress Wang and consort Zhao paved the way for Wu Zetian to become empress. However, this process was not easy. The deposed Wang, installed Wu, Fei Wanli Wu event was not just a struggle for favor in the harem, but in fact a fierce political confrontation between the emperor's faction and the faction of the old, established ministers. Empress Wang came from the Taiyuan Wang clan, one of the most powerful aristocratic clans of Guanlong at the time. She represented the old aristocracy, those who had served since Taizong's era and held real power in the court. Her deposition was fiercely opposed by senior ministers, led by Zhongsun, Wu Gaozong's maternal uncle, and Ku Shuliang. They saw it as an act that disrupted order and weakened their power base. In this battle, marriage became a political tool to restructure power. Emperor Gaozong, who had long felt constrained and overshadowed by the power of the ministers left by his father, found a perfect ally in Wu Zetian. She had no connections to the old factions and was completely loyal to him. Making her empress was not just to satisfy his love, but a deliberate political act to place one of his own people in the highest position of the harem, while dealing a heavy blow to the prestige and influence of the opposition. Wu Zetian skillfully and secretly garnered support, building her own faction in the court. Finally, in 655, despite all opposition, Emperor Gaozong succeeded in deposing Empress Wang and appointing Wu Zetian as the new empress of the Great Temps. This event marked the decline of the old aristocracy and the rise of centralized imperial power, with Wu Zetian at its center. Part 3. The Two Sages Holding Court. Occur Regency 660 to 683 3.1. The Heavenly Empress rules after becoming empress. Wu Zetian's influence on the court grew steadily. The decisive turning point came in 660, when Emperor Gaozong began to suffer from a stroke. His health severely weakened, and he was plagued by chronic headaches, unable to handle all state affairs. He made an unprecedented decision to hand over most of the power to handle national affairs to Empress Wu. This period is known in history as Two Sages Holding Court, Sheng Lin Chao. Whenever the court convened, Empress Wu would sit behind a screen behind the emperor's throne to listen and decide on political matters, to legitimize and elevate their status. They called themselves Heavenly Emperor Tenno, Andor, Hebendi Empress, Tan Ho, ruling as two co-saints. Initially, she only participated and advised, but as Gaozong's illness worsened, she gradually became the final decision-maker. This transfer of power was often depicted by later Confucian historians as a usurpation by a power-hungry woman from a weak husband. However, records show that Gaozong himself proactively and trustingly handed power to her. He recognized her superior political ability, decisiveness, and vision, qualities that he himself lacked. Their relationship during this period was a close Political partnership. Gaozong needed someone trustworthy and capable to run the empire for him, and Wu Zetian was the perfect choice. Power was not usurped, but was transferred systematically and legitimized through official titles and ceremonies. 3.2 Policies of governance and border. Expansion under the joint rule of the two sages. The Tang dynasty continued to inherit and promote the prosperity of the Gengguan era. Domestically, the political situation was stable. The economy and society developed, and the people's lives were peaceful. The Empress proposed the 12 matters of governance, which were highly praised for their vision, focusing on developing agriculture, reducing taxes, and lessening the burden on the people in foreign affairs. This was the period when the Tang territory expanded to its greatest extent. The prestige of the Great Temps was consolidated through successful conquests of Baekje in 663 and Goguryeo on the Korean peninsula, as well as defeating the Western Turks in Central Asia, to display their prestige and affirm the era's prosperity. Gaozong and Empress Wu jointly performed the grand Fengshen ceremony at Mount Tai in 666. This was an extremely important ritual of sacrificing to heaven and earth, only performed by enlightened rulers in the most peaceful and prosperous times. Notably, the Empress broke with tradition, taking on the role of second offerer, the person who makes the second offering after the emperor, a role traditionally reserved for high-ranking ministers, thereby asserting her equal status with the Emperor. 3.3 An iron fist in a velvet glove, consolidating power and eliminating obstacles as her power became more consolidated. Empress Wu began to ruthlessly eliminate any threat to her position, including her own sons. In a patriarchal society, her position was always precarious and tied to her role as the wife and mother of the emperor. Therefore, the greatest threat to her power was not external enemies, but the legitimate heirs of the Tang dynasty, crown. Prince Li Hong, her eldest son, was a benevolent, talented man who was popular with the officials. When he had disagreements with his mother about her deep involvement in court affairs, he suddenly died in 675. Many historical sources believe he was poisoned by his own mother to eliminate a rival power center that was forming. The successor, Crown Prince Li Shun, was also skilled in both literary and martial arts. However, his talent became a danger in his mother's eyes. He was suspected of plotting rebellion after he commissioned a commentary on the Book of the Later Han, which contained passages believed to be subtle criticisms of women's involvement in politics. In 684, Li Shun was deposed, exiled, and eventually forced to commit suicide. These ruthless actions show Wu Zetian's complete transformation from a mother to an absolute politician, where protecting power was the ultimate goal, transcending even blood ties. She had reached a cold conclusion to protect her unique position. She had to eliminate anyone who could possibly challenge it. Part 4. The Zenith of Power. Founding the Wu Zhou dynasty. 692-754.1. From Empress Dowager, Regent, to Female Emperor. 683. Emperor Gaozong passed away, leaving a will that granted the Heavenly Empress the authority to decide on major court matters. Her third son, Li Shun, ascended the throne as Emperor Gaozong. However, the young emperor was too hasty in building his own faction. Less than 2 months after his enthronement, on the pretext that Gaozong wanted to appoint his father-in-law, Wei Juanzhen, as Shizhong, head of the Chancellery, Empress Dowager Wu acted swiftly. She issued an edict deposing Gaozong, demoting him to Prince of Luling, and exiling him. Afterward, Empress Dowager Wu placed her youngest, more obedient son, Li Dan, on the throne as a puppet emperor known as Emperor Gaozong. Gaozong held only the title, while all real power remained in his mother's hands. Over the next 6 years, as Empress Dowager Regent Wu Zetian systematically eliminated all remaining members of the Li imperial clan and opposing ministers, firmly consolidating her power with all obstacles cleared on the 9th day of the 9th month of 690, she took the final step. She deposed Gaozong, grandly ascended the throne, and proclaimed herself Holy and Divine Emperor Shengshen Huangdi. She changed the dynasty name from Tang to Zhou, known in history as the Wu Zhou dynasty, and moved the capital to Luoyang, renaming it Shendu Divine Capital. Wu Zetian had become the only officially recognized female emperor in Chinese history, Board 2. Legitimizing the throne, propaganda and religion were Zetian's greatest. Challenge was not military, but ideological. How to make a patriarchal Confucian society accept a female emperor. She proved to be a master of political communication, skillfully using religion and cultural symbols to shape public opinion and legitimize her political revolution. She elevated Buddhism, a religion she had revered since childhood, to the status of state religion to counterbalance Taoism, which the Temp's imperial Li clan revered. She sponsored a group of monks, led by Zhu Wei, to compile and widely disseminate the Great Cloud Sutra, Mahamegha Sutra. This sutra was interpreted as containing a prophecy about a female sovereign, an incarnation of Maitreya, Buddha, who would descend to rule the world. This provided a sacred mandate of heaven and divine legitimacy for her enthronement, turning a rebellious act in the eyes of Confucianism into a sacred event in the eyes of Buddhist followers. In addition, she performed a highly symbolic act by creating a series of new Chinese characters known as Zetian characters. The most prominent of these was the character Zhao, Zhao, in her name, composed of sun, Earth, and moon, above sky, Kong. This character meant the sun and moon shining together in the sky, implying she was a unique entity, illuminating a new era. The creation of new characters was a brilliant move. It broke the old order at the linguistic level, forcing everyone who wrote her name to acknowledge her authority and uniqueness. This was an extremely effective form of soft power, demonstrating her deep understanding of psychology and culture. 4.3 The Wu Zhou Dynasty 692-705 Achievements and atrocities. Wu Zetian's 15-year rule during the Wu Zhou dynasty was a typical bipolar model, progressive in administration and brutal in politics. These two aspects were not contradictory but complemented each other to serve the sole purpose of consolidating power, rule by merit and terror. As someone who ascended the throne amidst much opposition, Wu Zetian needed a new bureaucracy absolutely loyal to her instead of the old Tang dynasty. She used the imperial examination system ostensibly to achieve this. She expanded the examinations, regardless of background, to select true talents. She was known for her good observation and judgment, readily dismissing the incompetent and promoting the capable, even if they came from humble origins. This broke the monopoly of the old aristocratic families, creating a new class of officials who were indebted and loyal to the Wu Zhou dynasty. However, parallel to her use of talented individuals, she tolerated a brutal secret police force known as the Cruel Officials, Coolly, it typified by Lei Junshin and Zhou Xing. This force was given special privileges and could use brutal torture, false accusations, and forced confessions to eliminate the remaining members of the Li imperial family and opposing ministers. This created a climate of political terror in the court, preventing anyone from openly resisting. Thus, the promotion of new talent and the terrorizing of old factions were two sides of the same strategy, replacing the old power structure with a new one completely under her control. Economy, society, and military. Economically, Wu Zetian continued policies that encouraged agriculture and developed production, helping to keep the people's lives generally stable. Her dynasty is considered one of the wealthiest periods, with the Chinese economy accounting for a significant share of the global GDP at the time. Militarily, the Wu Zhou dynasty faced many major challenges on its borders. In the northeast, the rise of the Balhae kingdom and rebellions by the Hetans caused many losses for the Zhou army. In the northwest, the territory was constantly invaded by the Second Turkic Khaganate, keeping the border in a state of tension. Part 5. Twilight of a Dynasty. Abdication and an Immortal Legacy. 70551. The Shenlong Kuin, her later years. Wu Zetian was in her 80s. Her health was failing, and she was frequently ill. She became increasingly distant from court affairs, and particularly favored two young brothers, Zhang Yetzi and Zhang Changsong. She allowed them free access to the Forbidden Palace, bestowing upon them titles and power. The Zhong brothers took advantage of this favor to act tyrannically, interfering in court affairs, which caused great resentment and anger among the officials and the Tang imperial clan. The Zhang brothers' arrogance was the last straw. In 705, a group of senior ministers, led by Prime Minister Zhang Jianzi, along with Kui Zhonwei, Wan Yanfen, and generals loyal to the Tang dynasty like Li Duosuo, decided to act. They launched a palace coup, known in history as the coup Shenlong Geming. The coup forces quickly entered the palace, killing Zhang Yitzi and Zhang Changsong at Wu Zetian's residence. They then surrounded the Changsheng Hall, where the Empress was resting, and forced her to abdicate, ceding the throne to Crown Princely Shun Emperor Gaozong, whom she had recalled and re-established as Crown Prince in 698, closing parenthesis, .5.2, final days, and death forced to abdicate. Wu Zetian was honored by the ministers as Zetian Dashing Emperor, but was, in reality, under house arrest at Shanyang Palace in Luoyang, having lost all power. Living in loneliness and illness, she passed away on December 16, 705, at the age of 82. The Tang dynasty's historical records simply state her death was due to old age and illness. However, it cannot be denied that the psychological collapse after suddenly losing all the power she had fought her entire life to obtain certainly hastened her death. 5.3. The blank. Steely. A verdict for posterity, according to her final wish. Wu Zetian was buried with her husband, Emperor Gaozong, at Qinling Mausoleum. However, the most special and mysterious legacy she left for posterity is her tombstone. It is a giant, exquisitely carved stone, steely, but completely devoid of any writing, known as the blank stele Wu Zhou. The meaning of the blank stele has become one of the greatest debates among Chinese historians. There are three main theories. Merits too great to be recorded. Wu Zetian believed her contributions and achievements were so great that no text could fully describe them. Awareness of her sins. She was aware that her actions were earth-shattering and went against social norms, especially usurping the Tang throne. So she left the stele blank to show remorse and avoid posterity's ridicule. Let posterity judge. This is the most widely supported theory, with the pride of someone who made history. Wu Zetian believed her merits and demerits were an extremely complex issue. She left the stele blank with the implication that only future generations would have the qualification and perspective to make a fair judgment on her extraordinary life. The blank stele can be seen as Wu Zetian's final and greatest act in controlling her own legacy. She knew that after her death, the Confucian historians of the restored Tang dynasty would surely use the harshest words to denigrate her. Anything carved on her tombstone would be decided by her enemies. By leaving a blank stele, she neutralized that effort. The blank stele became an eternal question, a challenge to any simple judgment. It forces later generations to debate, to reflect, and to not impose a single answer on her life. It was her way of ensuring that her legacy would remain forever, complex, controversial, and immortal, just like the woman herself. Part 6. Conclusion and Assessment. The assessment of Wu Zetian in the flow of history has always been extremely polarized. Traditional Confucian historians, notably Sima Guang in his work Zetian, often condemned her as a cruel, wicked, and licentious woman who overturned the social order. They focused on her crimes, such as killing her children, harming loyal ministers, and using a secret police force to rule by terror. From this perspective, she was a demoness, a tyrant who stained history. However, since the 1950s, modern historians have taken a more balanced and objective view. They recognize her outstanding political talent and undeniable contributions. Politically, she maintained national stability, continued the prosperity of the Gangwon-era Emperor Taizong, and laid a solid foundation for the Golden Kaiyuan era of her grandson, Emperor Gaozong. She was someone who knew how to use talented people, regardless of their background. By expanding the imperial examination system, she broke the monopoly of the Guanlong aristocratic class, creating a fairer promotion mechanism for scholars across the country, thereby strengthening central authority and promoting social justice. Ultimately, Wu Zetian is an incredibly complex historical figure who cannot be defined by simple labels like tyrant or hero. She was both a ruthless politician who stopped at nothing to achieve and protect power, and a talented ruler with great foresight. She was a product of her time, but also the one who reshaped that era. Her life is a powerful testament to the strength of will, intellect, and ambition of a woman who dared to challenge and break all limits to reach the absolute pinnacle of power. Her legacy, like the blank stele at kindling, remains empty yet full of meaning, forever challenging posterity to render a final verdict.